Hello, I'm Watt Key. I want to thank y'all for hanging out with me a little bit today while I show you some of what I do on a day-to-day basis to write the books that I write. We're going to start off by walking down here to my home office where I do most of my writing, and I'm going to show y'all a little bit about my process. And this is my little office that was actually a portable building that I got hauled in here and I refinished it. And this is where I get most of my work done. So come on inside. So what I usually do is I sit down right here, and there's of course my computer, and I'll usually start off by procrastinating as much as I can. And I'll make sure everything's straight. I have to get everything super straight before I get started. So I'll kind of spend some time just kind of organizing things like fishing swivels to go somewhere else. And after I've spent enough time procrastinating, I'll usually pull up what I was working on the day before. And that is going to be the new book I'm working on. And right now, it doesn't have a name, but it's in an outline form. And I'll typically outline a lot before I start writing. I used to not outline as much, but I do now since I have deadlines and I keep from getting stuck. So what I'll do is last night, even though this was an outline, I actually started writing a little bit about it. So below my outline, I have about a page of the introduction to the story. But what I usually do in the outline is I have notes like, here's some suggested titles. This book is going to be about a dog man. I want to set it in Texas, and I want to write it like a journal. And I have the main characters. I have some notes and some things I want to include. Like I have this word blood craving that I heard somebody talk about, and it's when an animal, when a predator starts eating another animal, like their prey, they get so into eating it that they get what's called blood craving, and they're almost unstoppable, and you don't want to approach them when they're like that. So I hadn't heard that word before, and I thought it would be kind of cool to put it in there. And I have the setting, Counce, Texas, and I chose that place because it was going to be close to a big area of national wildlife where I could put this creature that these boys are going to be hunting down. And then I talk about the main characters and a little bit about what I want their personalities to be like. And then the part I spend the most time on is what I call what everybody calls the inner conflict. In all your stories you have outer and inner conflict. And the outer conflict is the easy thing. That's the bad guy, or sometimes it doesn't have to be a person. Like in my book Deepwater, it was actually nature. But it's the tangible thing that is trying to keep the main character from achieving his goal, the bad guy most of the time. But the inner conflict is always what's going on in the main character's head that he has to get through. And it could be things like his parents are getting divorced, or he got beat up bad at school, his dad doesn't love him. It could be anything like that, but the enemy in his head. And so usually the character finds some way to get past both the inner and the outer conflict by the end of the story. And as a result of that, they change. And you always want to have the main character change in some way because it gives you more of a connection with them, and you feel like you've been through something in their life, and it makes you closer to them. So I'll typically come, and right now it takes me about a year to do a book. And as I said, on this one, I'm in the outline form, and then I'll start writing it probably in the next couple of weeks. But I'll probably spend another week or so just trying to figure out inner conflict. That's the hardest part for me. And I'll read over what I did last night, and I'll correct it some, and then I'll write probably about 500 to 1,000 words a day. And that's about as much as I can do. It'll take me about 2 hours to do that. And I'll only work on one project at a time. I typically have, when I'm writing a book, I'm about 2 years away from it coming out. I'll spend a year writing it, and then it'll take another year from when I send it to the publisher until they get all the artwork designed and do all the editing and actually put it in the bookstores. So this book right here probably won't come out until 2022. And right now I'm editing my book for 2021. So I'll spend about 2 hours a day writing. And then the rest of the time I spend either reading things that are going to help me with my book I'm working on or editing. You'll see right here, this is my 2021 book. And I'm left-handed, so something I do that's kind of weird is I'll go from the back to the front and I type on the back of the pages. So this book I'm actually editing, and you'll see this is pretty close because I don't have a lot of marks on the page. Like this, I just found one problem. I wanted to change grandparents to grandmother. And I'll go through this book probably about 15 times. I'll read this book to get all the problems out of it. And that doesn't include the editor. Once they get it, the people in New York, they'll find more problems and send it back to me. But actually editing is probably my favorite part of the process. The writing's the hard part, but I like it when the writing's done and I can spend time editing it and just getting it tighter and tighter and more perfect, because all the hard thinking part is over with. Because with editing, there's an answer, there's a right and wrong answer to everything. But with writing, there's never really a right answer. There's always more ways you can do it. So this book is a pretty long one, but I'll go through it again another couple of times and I'll send it back to my publisher and they'll find some things wrong with it. But that's kind of how I do it. I print everything out and I put holes in it, and I have this big hole puncher right here. It's kind of cool. It does a bunch of pages at a time. And my favorite thing, something that probably a lot of people don't have, is called a paper jogger. I'm going to show you how that works. So it's this thing right here, and you can put a bunch of pages in it, and you can turn it on, and it evens them all out. And then I can put it in my binder. If I can get it in there. There we go. So anyway, so this is the one in process editing, and this is the new one going on over here. So here's my newest book, Beast. So this is the one that I just got last week. So I did this one 2 years ago, and it'll be in bookstores in a couple of weeks. You can see my bookshelf over here. I don't have a lot of books, but I only keep my favorite books, and if I run out of room, then I start tossing out the ones that aren't my favorites anymore. But I don't know, I'll just reach up and pick one. Let's see, Edward Abbey, you probably don't like him. Here's Cool Hand Luke. I always liked Cool Hand Luke. Steinbeck, Faulkner. Here's Mark Twain, Roughing It. That's one of my favorites. I love Mark Twain. If I could be any writer, I would probably want to be Mark Twain. He's my favorite. And I have some signed books from authors I've met. Here's Marcus Zuzak's Book Thief. Met Marcus a couple times. And let's see, what else do I have? Just all my favorite stuff here. Let's see. Anyway, and here's some more of my books here. I have another office that we're going to go to later, and I'm going to show you where I keep most of my books, all the foreign editions and stuff. Here's my favorite of all time, Where the Red Fern Grows. I keep that around. And sometimes when I'm writing, like if especially when I'm trying to think of, I'm starting a book and I want to think about maybe how to start it off or what point of view to use, I'll pick up a book like Where the Red Fern Grows, and I'll kind of just look through it and kind of get the voice and sort of see how they did things, and maybe do something a little like that. And let's see. So then I just have some miscellaneous memorabilia down there. Oh, this is just my pillow. Sometimes I'll come down here and lay down and read right there. These are some chairs from the Alabama Moon movie set, and think one of these, yeah, see, it's kind of, it says Watkey on it. They set this up for me when they were doing the movie. And here's some of my reviews. That's from the New York Times. And that one, I don't know, oh, that's from the Mobile Press Register. And I've got some awards over here. Here's a big deer I shot one time. I keep it in here. And this is when I'm working on screenplays, which I don't do a lot of, but I'll use this board and I'll plot it out. And you kind of have to do that with screenplays. It's a lot more structured, so I'll do that there. I can't think of anything else I've got in here. Here we are at my office in downtown Mobile, and I'm going to show you around a little bit and explain to you what I do when I'm here. This is where I usually come after I've finished my writing in the mornings, and I also run a software company out of here that I started when I was in my late 20s. And so when I get down here, it's all business. I do the writing business and the software business here. So this is my office, and it's my little conference room over here. And I wanted to show you some of my books. Here's my bookcase, and I have a copy of just about all of my books. And these right here are, a lot of them are in different languages. Like here, this one's kind of neat. This is Alabama Moon in Japanese. And the way they do it is the Japanese write from the back to the front. And so it starts back here. And apparently that's what they think moon looks like in Japan. Here's a Chinese one. I think that's, yeah, I think this is simplified Chinese. Here is, I don't know what this one is. This might be, there's a Slovakia one. Maybe that's that. There's French and German. Alabama Moon does really well in Germany for some reason. It translates well. When you sell a book overseas in another language, there's a translator that reads your book and rewrites the whole thing. So unless you know how to speak the language, you don't really know what they say. So sometimes maybe they do a good job and sometimes they don't. So whoever redid it in Germany must have done a really good job because they really like it over there. And here's Dirt Road Home. This is German. They changed the name of it sometimes because in Germany, Dirt Road Home, the way it translated, I don't know if it was a bad word or it just kind of meant something that they didn't like. So they called it Nieman's Land, which means no man's land. So they got to change the title over there. And I basically have a copy of, let's see, what's this one? There's another one. This might be French. So I also have copies of all my advanced readers editions. Like here's the one from Alabama Moon. This one's really old. So this is the first edition they send out just to the like reviewers and things like that before the hardback comes out. So here's first edition Alabama Moons. I never did really like this cover. I was glad when they did the movie and changed the cover to a different one. It's kind of a long story, but they had another cover at first. They hired an artist from France to do a cover, and it didn't work out at the end. So they did this one kind of last minute, and it's okay. I just like the movie cover better. But actually, my favorite cover is the one they did for the paperback. This one, for some reason, I've always liked that cover the most, and I think that's a good looking little paperback. So we got Hideout, got Among the Swamp People, and there's Deepwater, Terror at Bottle Creek. So there's kind of a copy of all of them down there. And this is kind of neat. This is my book that I kept of all the rejections that I got when I was writing. And there's hundreds of them, all the correspondence from agents, and let's see, like here's one. Dear Wyatt, thanks for giving me an opportunity to read Rack Rent. Let me say that you have written a memorable story that is, so it all starts off with a compliment, and then at the end they say something like, but I don't think this is quite the book for me. So that went on for this is like 15 years of getting rejected. And all writers go through that. It gets to be a game. You just have to kind of stick with it until you get good enough or get lucky enough. See what else I have. Here's Alabama Moon audio CDs. People don't do those much anymore. Oh, that's a German audio. So that's kind of my bookshelf. And let's see over here, I have these little things on my desk that I fiddle with sometimes. This is my frog. It makes a frog sound. Well, it sounds like a frog. I always thought that was pretty neat. And then you have the cricket. You have the big frog. Got those. And my trick, mouse that gets your finger. And this is my desk. So this is where I'll sit, and sometimes I use this thing like if I'm doing Skype interviews. I'll have an iPad I put right here, and I'll be sitting right here when I do my Skype interviews. I'll do my online stuff either from the house or at my home office, or I'll do it from here, just depending on kind of what I've got going on and where I am at the time. And let me see what else I've got. I think that's pretty much it. We're driving along the causeway through the Mobile Tensas Delta right now, and this is where I've set 3 books. It's 5 rivers come together here, and there's a big swamp out there. When I was in my mid-20s, I barged a bunch of lumber about 5 miles straight that way, and I built a camp. And I wrote a book called Among the Swamp People, which documents the years that I was up there and building that camp and meeting people. But a book you'll be more familiar with, or 2 books, are Terror at Bottle Creek, which takes place in a place where we're going to go see in just a minute, and also Hideout. Now Hideout, you'll say that was in Mississippi. Well, originally it wasn't. I wrote Hideout to take place up here in the Mobile Tensas Delta. But after I'd finished the book, I realized that the main character in Alabama would have been too young to legally drive a boat. And with his dad being a policeman, that would never be able to happen. So I was really worried about it at first. I thought I'd ruined the whole book. And then I did my research, and I realized that I could move the whole thing to Mississippi and set it there, and it would work because the legal driving age for a boat was younger in Mississippi. So I also wanted to show you that I went and got my mail, and so I get fan letters from kids, and a lot of kids email me, and a lot of kids send me letters, and I don't always respond to the emails at length. I respond to all of them, but I just don't have time to get back to everybody that emails me with any lengthy response. But people that handwrite me letters, I always write them back with my own handwritten letter. So I've got a few here. I've got 4 or 5 that I've got to get back to, and they come from all over, and they're fun to read. So that's kind of a fun part about being a writer, is getting to write letters. I actually like to write letters and think that it's a good way to, a good old-fashioned way to communicate with people that makes you think that, makes them think they're special enough for you to spend a little more time on. I talked earlier about my process of writing, of outlining the book, and how I spend a lot of time on the inner and outer conflict. That's what I spend the most time on, is developing the characters and figuring out what their problems are, the inner conflict. But I also spend some time on the actual outline of the story arc, and by that I mean the 3 acts of the story is how I think about it. You have your beginning of the story, where you set it up, you introduce the characters, and you give them a problem. And then the middle of the story the problem has gotten so bad that you don't think they're going to be able to overcome it, and then that's at the top of the peak, and then the end, the third act, as you start going down the other side of the arc, is when you solve the problem and wrap everything up. I think a lot about the development of the characters, but the things like the story arc and the pacing and ending chapters on cliffhangers, those are all important to make a book that keeps people's attention. But I don't really have to think about those so much. I sort of do it instinctually, and I think that most writers start to do that. And I think that me especially, I loved middle school age books when I was growing up, and I instinctively tried to imitate those books, and I read enough of them to where I would write like they did, with the same pacing and same age characters and same types of adventures. And so I think if you read enough and you practice writing enough, then you sort of absorb pacing and story arc, and you do it naturally. So I thought I'd tell you all about that. For me, the hardest part is definitely the inner conflict part of it. Some of y'all might remember the part in Terror at Bottle Creek where Court and his dad bring the girls to the bridge after they're hurt to get rescued. And here's the bridge right in front of us that I used in the book. Of course, in the book, the water was a lot higher than this, but this is where Curly came to pick them up. We're here at the landing where I based Terror at Bottle Creek, and this is the Tensas River. This is the setting of Terror at Bottle Creek, but I just transported this setting about 15 miles upriver. But you'll see there's the bait shop that Court would have used and worked in, and there's the boat slips over there. I have one of those boat slips where I keep a boat, and if you look up on the hill, that would have been where Liza's house. And then you can imagine at the beginning of the book, Court would have been standing about right where I'm standing now, waiting for his dad to arrive so that they could take the people on the alligator hunt. And his houseboat would have been right over there, about where those houseboats are. All right, I've got a treat for y'all. In Terror at Bottle Creek, I think you remember me talking about the giant rats. We found one, and here it is. It's called a nutria. It's roadkill, but thought you could see that. That's a rat. And now you know what they look like, but I thought y'all might be interested in that. It's kind of gross, but not many people get to see those. Right here is the house I grew up in that my grandfather built back in the 40s. And I was the oldest of 7 children, and originally it was just this small L part, and then when I was about 10 years old they added on this wing right here. My father did, and all of the boys stayed on this side and all of the girls stayed on this side. There were 5 boys and 2 girls. And then when I was in about 10th grade, everybody started outgrowing that, and my father built me this little house back here that I'll show you, that became my room. This was my room from about 10th grade until, well, while I was in college, and I still use it now as an office, and we come over here in the summer times, and I use this as a writing office. It's mostly a little bit storage right now, but my bed was right here, and I had a little closet right there, and then a little bathroom. So there wasn't much to it, but as a 10th grader, this was pretty nice to have your own space like this, especially after you're used to being packed in there with 4 other younger brothers. And right now, here's where I'll sit and do my writing in the summertime when we're over here. And it's March right now, so we haven't been over here in quite a while.
I went to a small school. There were only about 23 people in my class. There were 9 boys and the rest girls. And I was never the best at anything except creative writing. My dad read to us a lot growing up. We didn't watch much television, and that's how I got an early appreciation for stories. I was always fascinated with stories, and not just the stories themselves, but I like to make books. I would draw pictures. I was a pretty good drawer, and I would take cardboard and I would bind the books together, my pictures and my story, to make books. And I was fascinated from an early age with the whole process of bookmaking. And I always dreamed of having a book in the library one day. My mother, while my dad was more of an engineering-minded type person, my mom was more of an artist. So she encouraged the creative side of what I did. And Dad always encouraged me to pursue a path where I could make money. My English teacher, when I was a senior, convinced me that I should be a writer. She told me that I had talent at it. So I went to Birmingham Southern College, which is really a pretty small college relative to other schools. There were about 1,400 students there. But that was a really big school to me. And when I got there, I realized that I wasn't even close to the best writer in college. And I took one English class, and I really got intimidated by, they were reading all this hard stuff like Faulkner and Shakespeare and Dostoevsky, and I just wanted to read books about coon dogs and pirates and adventures. And so I got discouraged, and I decided to be a computer science major. So meanwhile, I was still writing though. I still like to write. And I think that just like people that like to play guitar or paint pictures, if you're kind of wired that way to express yourself creatively, and you're going to do it whether you end up being famous for it or not. Guitar players still like to play guitar even if they're not going to be in a famous band one day. So I like to write so much that I kept doing it even though I was not in any English classes and I had no writer friends. And I was probably writing more than anybody at the school. And I was sending novels up to New York starting my freshman year. And on one of those, I was always looking for ideas to write about, because as a writer, I think you have to be original. Most writers, and I'm no exception, start off writing about themselves. And nobody's really as interesting as they think they are. And so you have to get past writing about yourself. And you certainly want to write about things you know, but you need to be able to elaborate on them to create stories that are bigger than you. And you need to come up with original stories. One of my most original things that I did led to what would become my first novel, Alabama Moon. And that was a survival trip I did in college where I spent 2 weeks in the wild just living off the land with basically nothing but a bow and arrow and a few matches, and that was about it. If you go to my website, there are a lot of pictures of that on the website. So you have to come up with original ideas, but write about what you know and in a way that's bigger than yourself. Alabama Moon was my first published novel, but it wasn't the first novel I wrote. Starting with my first novel my freshman year, which, like most beginning writers, was mostly about me, I think Alabama Moon was my 10th novel that I wrote for over the course of about 15 years. And it was the first one I would get published. All of the other 9 before that will never be published. And I just have to consider them as practice. And I think that's another part of being a professional writer, is you have to realize that some of it's practice. A lot of people, especially when they're first starting, they write their first book and they have a hard time letting go of it. And the reality of it is, it's probably not good enough. You probably haven't practiced enough. And it's hard to think that you wasted all that time. But you can't really think of it like that. You have to think of it as practice. And even today, whenever I finish a book, I'm always working on the next book. Now, most of my books get sold now, but when I was first starting off, I would be sending one book up to New York and mailing it to 3 or 4 places every month. But all the while, I was working on the next book because I didn't really know when I would be good enough. And it took me 15 years. It probably doesn't take most writers who wrote as much as I did that long, but I was never the smartest guy in the class. I didn't have any formal English training, but what I did have is I liked it so much that I was gonna write anyway, whether I ended up selling a book or not. And I think that's important because, you know, writing, it can be a long shot to get published, and you have to like it enough to where you would do it anyway. Thank you all for being interested in my books, and I hope you learned a little bit about my writing process and some of the settings that go into my stories. Thank you.